Have you ever tried to break a bad habit, only to find yourself right back where you started? You were serious, you wanted change, but a few days in, it all fell apart. One distraction, one craving, one emotional dip, and suddenly it's gone. Your progress, your pride, your belief in yourself. But maybe the issue isn't you. Maybe the system you were using was never built for how real humans actually change. There's a Japanese philosophy called Kaizen, used by doctors, engineers, even samurai warriors, not to push harder, but to grow smarter, 1 minute at a time, quietly, consistently, without waiting for motivation. And that's what I'll walk you through today, step by step. Not theory, not hype, a method that works, even on your worst day. But first, make this personal. Say this out loud, or write it down right now. 1% today. Then name the habit you want to change. And if this message already speaks to you, pause for 1 second. Like this episode so others can find it too. Then scroll down and leave a comment with your own 1% today habit. That small commitment makes the practice real. Now, let's begin. We go back to the moment this system was born, not in a book, but in post-war Japan, when one quiet principle changed everything. 1. The day everything changed. The year was 1950. Japan was still recovering from the ashes of war, industries broken, factories silent, and morale at an all-time low. Into this environment stepped a quiet mind, W. Edwards Deming. He wasn't a general or a politician, he was a statistician, a man obsessed not with intensity, but with systems. And he introduced one concept that would change everything: continuous improvement, not with big moves, with small measurable corrections. At first, it didn't catch on. The West ignored him. But in Japan, his ideas found fertile ground. One factory in particular, Toyota, decided to build a new way of thinking around this approach. It wasn't about working harder. It was about improving by 1% every day. The engineer, Taiichi Ohno, took the idea and made it operational. Floor workers were trained to pause when they spotted even the tiniest defect. Each problem wasn't a failure. It was a signal, and those signals became the blueprint for long-term transformation. This was the day everything changed. The beauty of it wasn't speed, it was sustainability. You didn't need a breakthrough. You needed a reliable step forward, repeated over and over again. That's what gave birth to the Toyota production system, still studied by universities and CEOs to this day. But let's bring this back to you. What if the habit you're trying to break isn't a personal flaw, but a process flaw? What if it's not about fixing your life in a weekend, but creating a system that supports change even when you're tired, distracted, or low on motivation? Imagine this. Instead of saying, "I'll quit sugar forever," you say, "I'll delay dessert by 60 seconds." Instead of, "I'll never scroll again," you say, "I'll take 1 breath before I unlock my phone." These moments feel small, but so did the first factory worker raising his hand to stop the line. That act, small, brave, repeated, changed an entire economy. If you want to change your life, don't start with what's impressive. Start with what's doable. That's when change becomes automatic. So here's your step. Say this out loud or write it down. 1% today, then name your habit. This is the start of your system, not a goal, a behavior. Something you can repeat when you're tired, something that grows with you. What if 1 minute today could lead to transformation tomorrow? 2. The Japanese doctor. When we hear about long life, we often think of genetics, luck, or expensive routines. But what if the key to physical resilience and mental clarity wasn't found in big interventions, but in small, repeatable patterns? Enter Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara, a Japanese physician who didn't just live to 105. He worked full-time until the age of 100. He didn't retire from life, he deepened into it. This man wasn't a motivational speaker. He was one of Japan's most respected doctors, president of St. Luke's International Hospital in Tokyo, and author of over 150 books on health and longevity. He personally treated tens of thousands of patients, led medical reforms, and lectured well into his late 90s. But what struck people most wasn't his resume. It was his energy. He moved like a man 40 years younger. And when asked about the secret to his long and vibrant life, his answer was consistent and surprisingly simple. He said, "Start small, move daily, have purpose, and never retire from life." That simplicity echoes the very heart of Kaizen. For Dr. Hinohara, health was never about a big transformation. It was about rhythm. He never took the elevator. He walked upstairs, sometimes dozens of floors, on purpose. Not because it was impressive, but because it was consistent. That small act, repeated daily, became a ritual of resistance against decline. It wasn't about burning calories, it was about telling his body, "I'm still here, I still move forward." Stillness of the spirit, not motionless limbs, is what he feared most. This is where most people get habit change wrong. They try to defeat the habit by force, cold turkey, all or nothing. But biology doesn't work like that. The brain, especially the basal ganglia, which governs routines, doesn't like dramatic shifts. It doesn't trust big promises. What it does trust is repetition, rhythm, familiarity. And that's exactly what Kaizen offers. Dr. Hinohara understood this before most psychologists did. In fact, he practiced what today's cognitive behavioral therapists only recently began to study, that sustainable change comes not from intensity, but from identity. You don't achieve discipline, you become someone who takes the stairs without thinking, someone who drinks water before coffee without debate, someone who doesn't need to feel motivated to act, because the action is already woven into who they are. He also emphasized joy, not the superficial kind, but the deep contentment that comes from knowing you are living in alignment with your purpose. Energy comes not from eating more, he once said, but from feeling needed, from feeling you still have something to give. This reflects what the Japanese call ikigai, a reason for being. When you wake up with purpose, even small habits carry weight. And that's where the Kaizen method becomes more than a system. It becomes a philosophy of living. You aren't just trying to break a habit. You're trying to rebuild trust with yourself. That trust is fragile. You don't earn it by setting massive goals. You earn it by doing one small thing you promised yourself, and doing it again tomorrow. You might ask, how does this apply to something like quitting a bad habit, like mindless snacking, or wasting time, or doom scrolling at night? Here's how Dr. Hinohara would respond. Don't try to remove the habit. Replace it, quietly, subtly, with something lighter, simpler, and sustainable. Don't say, "I'll stop eating sugar forever." Say, "Tonight, I'll walk around my room for 1 minute before I open the fridge." That's the 1-minute pause. It interrupts the loop. Not by force, but by presence. And with each repetition, your brain gets a new signal. This is who we are now. This is how we move. Today, as neuroscience catches up, we now understand what Hinohara practiced intuitively. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for willpower, is like a muscle. It fatigues, but the habit loop is stored deeper in the automatic brain. So, to change a habit, you must stop trying to outmuscle it. Instead, you must slip a new cue action into the loop, slowly. Then repeat it until it sticks. The key insight here: you're not weak, your habit is just efficient. It's been repeated more, that's all. So here's what I want you to try today. Simple and clear. Say this out loud or write it in your notes. 1% today. Then name one small action you'll do for your body or your mindset, like walking before a craving or choosing water over soda. Make it so small you can't say no. Make it so easy that your brain can't resist. And as you take that step, remember this: a 105-year-old man outlived and outpaced expectations, not because he moved more, but because he never stopped moving. He proved that tiny, consistent steps are the most radical medicine of all. 3. The hidden philosophy. We often think change needs motivation, that before we can act, we need to feel ready, inspired, even desperate. But what if that's backward? What if waiting for motivation is the very thing keeping you stuck? Kaizen, at its core, is not a productivity tool. It's a worldview. It says, don't chase transformation. Create conditions for it. Let it emerge through rhythm, not force. This is what makes it so quietly powerful and so easily misunderstood. Let's go back for a moment to where this philosophy was born. The roots of Kaizen are ancient, far older than factories or corporate seminars. They echo Japan's deeper cultural values of patience, humility, and harmony. In Zen tradition, there is a concept called shoshin, beginner's mind. It means approaching everything, even the familiar, as if seeing it for the first time without pride, without assumption, with presence. This is not just poetic, it's practical, because when you act from beginner's mind, you stop trying to conquer your habit like a battle. You begin to relate to it like a rhythm you can rewrite. You shift from domination to collaboration. Seneca once wrote, "He who is brave is free." But the kind of bravery he meant wasn't dramatic. It was the courage to act without applause, the quiet strength of consistency. That's the kind of freedom Kaizen offers. Not instant change, but gradual liberation. What most people don't realize is that habits are not moral. They're mechanical. You're not bad because you check your phone too often. Your brain just found a loop that rewards it. Dopamine, novelty, escape, and it repeated it. The error isn't weakness, it's unconsciousness. Kaizen brings light into that loop, 1 minute at a time. The philosopher Lao Tzu said, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, but what's more important is how that step is taken, not rushed, not resented, but honored. Every step becomes a vote for your future self." Imagine two people trying to stop a nightly binge-eating habit. One deletes all junk food, starts a hardcore diet, and posts their new plan on social media. The other pauses for 60 seconds before the snack. Just one breath. Just one quiet observation. Do I want this? Or am I just avoiding something? In 3 days, the first person might feel proud, but in 3 weeks they're likely overwhelmed. The second person, still quiet, still consistent, still growing. Not because they're stronger, but because they started from the root. Awareness, not punishment. This is what Kaizen understands, that most self-help does not. True change begins not with shame, but with curiosity. You ask, what's the smallest action I can take without resistance? Then you take it, then you repeat it. That's it. No inspiration needed, just design. Modern behavioral psychology confirms this. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, explains it simply. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And Kaizen is a system that works because it respects your humanity. It doesn't demand intensity. It honors sustainability. So if you've failed before, good. That means you've learned what doesn't work. Now it's time to practice what does. Here's your next invitation. Say this out loud or in your notes. 1% today. Then name a small act of awareness you will practice, like pausing before you react or breathing before a choice. Because the habit isn't just what you do, it's who you become in the moments between decisions, and that's where your freedom begins. 4. Kaizen in 1 minute. Most people never change because they wait for the perfect moment, the perfect Monday, the perfect mindset. But Kaizen teaches something radical. You don't need more time, you need less resistance. That's what makes the 1 minute principle so powerful. Let's step into a real story. In Japan, the government once faced a challenge. How do you get people to adopt healthy habits without force, shame, or lectures? The Ministry of Health, inspired by Kaizen, introduced a campaign called the 1 minute exercise. It was simple: stretch for 60 seconds. That's it. No gym, no equipment, no pressure. Just 1 minute. At home, in your clothes, wherever you are. What happened shocked the skeptics. That tiny ritual became a national movement. Offices began playing music at set times to prompt short exercises. Elderly citizens began improving mobility, and more importantly, resistance dropped. The excuse, "I don't have time," evaporated, because everyone had 60 seconds. This is what we miss when we try to change our lives with willpower alone. We aim for massive shifts, then get crushed by our own expectations. But Kaizen flips the script. It doesn't ask for your best day. It builds a system that works even on your worst. Let's bring this down to your own life. What's the habit you've been trying to change? Maybe it's hitting snooze, or emotional eating, or endless social media loops. What if, just for today, you interrupt that loop with a 1 minute ritual? Not a replacement. A pause, a wedge of awareness. Before the snack, you set a 1 minute timer and walk. Before the scroll, you do 10 slow breaths. Before the snooze button, you sit up and stretch your spine. That's it. In neuroscience, this is called pattern interruption. It breaks the automaticity of habit. It gives your prefrontal cortex a chance to engage before the impulse completes. And that tiny space, that's where power returns. Philosopher Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." But mastery doesn't begin with control. It begins with a pause, a single breath, a moment to choose. That's what the 1 minute rule creates. Not perfection, but a doorway. And the science backs it up. In studies on habit change, researchers found that the most effective interventions are ones that are easy to start, hard to avoid, and tied to a clear cue. The 1 minute ritual checks all three. It's small, it's simple, and you can stack it onto existing behaviors, what researchers call habit stacking. For example, right after brushing your teeth, write 1 sentence in a journal. When you sit at your desk, close your eyes for 1 minute before opening your screen. After lunch, walk for 60 seconds. You're not changing your life in a minute. You're changing your direction. You're saying, "I no longer wait for transformation to find me. I create the conditions for it." Because 1 minute isn't just time, it's trust. It's a message to yourself. I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to begin. So here's your real challenge today. Say this out loud or write it in your notes. 1% today. Then name your 1 minute ritual, something doable, repeatable, and real. Then do it. Don't analyze, don't debate, just show up. 1 minute, 1 vote, 1 step. You'll be amazed at what that adds up to. 5. The 1 minute rule. Start smaller. Here's a truth most people don't want to hear. You're not failing because you're lazy. You're failing because you're trying to start too big. The human brain resists dramatic change, especially when it's already overwhelmed. It's not a character flaw, it's cognitive load. Every habit you try to start adds a layer of friction, so the real art of change isn't forcing yourself harder, it's starting smaller, much smaller. This is the essence of the 1 minute rule, and while it sounds simplistic, it has changed the lives of thousands, quietly, steadily, and without fanfare. Let's look at a real example. Kenichi Omai, a brilliant Japanese organizational theorist and former senior partner at McKinsey & Company, once said, "Rowing harder doesn't help if the boat is headed in the wrong direction." That principle guided much of Japan's post-war industrial design, and it applies directly to your personal habits. Most people try to row harder, wake up earlier, work out longer, quit everything all at once. But if your starting point is too heavy, your brain will sabotage you the moment life gets hard. That's why starting small is not a compromise. It's the strategy. Here's what that looks like in practice. You want to start journaling. Don't write a page. Write 1 sentence. Want to meditate? Don't sit for 20 minutes. Just take 3 slow breaths. Want to read more? Don't commit to a chapter. Just open the book and read 1 paragraph. You might laugh. It feels silly, but that's the genius of it. Psychologically, what's happening is this. When you lower the entry barrier, you eliminate resistance. You create what's called a gateway behavior, a simple cue that leads to more. Most of the time, once you've started, momentum carries you forward. But even if it doesn't, you've still won. Because you honored the ritual, you showed up, and that's what counts. In his work, Omai emphasized that strategy must be frictionless. The best way to cut through complexity, he wrote, is to focus on the next step. Not the 10th step, the next one. And in habit formation, the next step is always, what can I do in less than 1 minute without thinking twice? This is where most self-help advice collapses under its own weight. It makes transformations sound epic. But change isn't epic. It's consistent, it's invisible, it's boring until it works. And when it does, it becomes identity. Here's something powerful to reflect on. You don't need to believe in yourself to start. You need to prove to yourself through action that you're trustworthy, that your word means something, even when the task is small, especially when it's small. Because that's how self-respect is built, not with declarations, but with repetition. In behavioral science, this is known as success spirals. When you complete small actions consistently, your brain begins to believe, I'm someone who follows through. That belief becomes your emotional armor, and from that place, you can scale. But if you start too big, you build the opposite spiral, one of failure, shame, and paralysis. That's why the 1 minute rule works. It's not a shortcut, it's a stabilizer. It keeps your progress anchored when everything else wants to drift. Now, let me ask you this. What's the habit you've been avoiding because it feels too heavy? Can you shrink it, until it becomes so light that doing it feels easier than avoiding it? If yes, then you've already made the shift. So here's your action today. Say this out loud or write it in your notes. 1% today. Then name one habit and reduce it to a version that takes under 60 seconds to begin. Not because that's all you'll do, but because that's what you'll commit to, no matter what. Kaizen doesn't demand you leap. It asks you to step, and once you've taken one, you've changed direction. 6. The first fall. It always starts the same way. You begin with momentum. You do your 1-minute ritual. You feel proud. You even start to believe. This time, it's working. And then, out of nowhere, you miss a day. A craving pulls you in. A mood swings low. You forget. You scroll. You break. And suddenly, it feels like you've undone everything. One failure, one misstep, and the inner voice returns. See, you're not consistent. You never finish what you start. This is the most dangerous moment. Not the habit itself, but the story that follows it. The first fall isn't the problem. The problem is how you interpret it. And that's why the philosophy of Kaizen is so important here. It doesn't just prepare you for progress, it prepares you for setbacks. It understands that failure is not a bug in the system, it is the system. Because repetition only becomes transformation when it survives friction. Let's study a real example. In the 1960s, Toyota was already thriving under the Kaizen system, but they didn't just track success, they tracked deviations. When something went wrong on the assembly line, the process didn't punish the worker. Instead, they pulled a cord called the andon. That cord stopped everything, not to assign blame, but to investigate the cause. What caused the error? Was the system too fragile? Was the step unclear? Was the person overworked? This was radical, because instead of saying work harder, they said, let's improve the environment. Now imagine applying that to yourself. You miss a workout, you binge late at night, you lose your temper. The old way says, punish yourself, shame yourself, start over Monday. Kaizen says, pull the cord, investigate. Why did this happen? What was the trigger? How can we design better? This is what psychologists call self-compassionate resilience. And the research is clear. People who respond to setbacks with curiosity instead of criticism are far more likely to bounce back and sustain the habit long-term. Because consistency is not the absence of failure. It's the skill of restarting, quickly, gently, and without drama. Marcus Aurelius captured this beautifully in Meditations. When jarred, unavoidably by circumstance, return to yourself at once. Do not lose the rhythm more than you must. The phrase, return to yourself at once, is the heartbeat of this entire method. You will fall, you will miss. That's not the question. The question is, how quickly do you return? So here's what I want you to practice after your first fall. Instead of starting over, resume. Instead of self-judgment, run a check-in. What time of day did I slip? What emotion was I avoiding? What system failed to support me? And then design one tiny fix. Just one. Maybe you move your phone charger outside the bedroom. Maybe you set a post-it on your fridge. Maybe you leave your walking shoes by the door. Don't punish the behavior. Patch the environment. That's how professionals think. Because the truth is, your environment shapes 90% of your habits. What's around you matters more than what's inside you. And if your first fall becomes a blueprint, not a breakdown, you're already stronger than yesterday. Here's your step today. Say this out loud or write it in your notes. 1% today. Then name a system tweak you'll make to recover faster after a slip. You're not broken, you're learning, and every fall is part of the rhythm. 7. If-then obstacle map, plan for triggers. Most people prepare for success. Almost no one prepares for sabotage. But if there's one certainty in habit change, it's this: your triggers will show up. The craving, the mood, the distraction, the late night, the stress, the doubt. And unless you have a plan before that moment arrives, you will fall into the default response, because the brain always chooses what's easy over what's ideal. Kaizen doesn't just teach progress, it teaches preparedness. And here's where the method gets tactical. In behavioral science, there's a concept called implementation intention. It's simple, powerful, and often ignored. It goes like this: if trigger, then I will response. This is not about willpower. It's about preloading the decision. Let's bring this into real history. During the 1980s, researchers in Germany ran a study on exercise habits. Two groups were given the same instruction: exercise once a week. But one group was told to write an if-then plan. If it is Monday at 5 p.m., then I will go to the gym for 30 minutes. The results? The group with the if-then plan followed through at more than double the rate. Why? Because when the moment of hesitation came, they didn't think, they executed. Now imagine applying this to your life. You're trying to quit late-night snacking. If I feel a craving after 9 p.m., then I will drink a full glass of water and brush my teeth. You want to stop wasting mornings on your phone. If I wake up and reach for my phone, then I will open a notes app and write one sentence instead. You tend to break routines when stressed. If I notice anxiety rising at work, then I will take 3 breaths before I respond. This is how you stop reacting to your habit and start replacing it. Seneca once wrote, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." What he meant was this: when you anticipate your challenges, you move with life. But when you pretend the storm won't come, it always catches you off guard. The if-then map is how you become the willing. It's your inner compass. Even Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary Japanese swordsman, used a form of if-then thinking. In the Book of 5 Rings, he emphasized preemptive strategy. In battle, if you think only of striking, you will be struck. Think first of positioning. In habit change, your position is your plan. It's what you do before the fight. And here's where it gets even more empowering. The more you rehearse your if-then responses, the more automatic they become. The brain wires new pathways through rehearsal, not just experience, so even imagining your response builds strength. Try this today. Think of your number 1 trigger, the exact moment you tend to break. Now speak this clearly: 1% today. If your trigger, then I will, your new micro-response. Not tomorrow, today. This is your mental armor, not to block discomfort, but to meet it, prepared, calm, and practiced. Because the trigger isn't the problem, not having a response is. 8. Measure and track in 30 seconds. We are what we repeat, but we only know what we repeat when we track it. Most people don't measure their habits. They rely on memory, mood, or guilt. I think I did okay this week. I feel like I'm making progress. But memory is emotional. Mood is unreliable. Guilt is deceptive. What we need instead is clarity. Kaizen teaches that small improvements are meaningless without visibility, and this isn't just a theory, It's one of the foundational pillars of how Japan rebuilt itself after catastrophe. Let's go back. After World War II, W. Edwards Deming worked with Japanese companies on a core idea: quality control through data, not guesses, not vibes, measurable feedback. Each worker, no matter how small their role, contributed to a system of visible metrics. The principle was, what gets measured gets managed. And slowly, those numbers told a story about where waste lived, where energy was leaking, where potential was being ignored. It wasn't magic, it was measurement. Now, imagine applying this to your habits. Most people say, I want to meditate more, but they never track how many days they did. They say, I want to eat healthier, but they don't write down what they actually ate. And so, the habit stays emotional, foggy, inconsistent, and nothing grows in fog. Here's where the 30-second rule changes everything. Every night, before bed, you take 30 seconds and log one thing. Did I do my 1% habit today? That's it. You can write a check mark, a number, a smiley face. You can use a paper calendar, a notes app, a wall sticker chart, anything visible. Because what you track, you reinforce. You don't need to log your whole life. You just need to track the habit you're building. Why? Because tracking creates momentum, even when motivation fades. Studies show that even seeing your own streak builds dopamine. The anticipation of keeping that streak alive is more powerful than the original reward. That's called the consistency bias. Your brain wants to stay in sync with what it already started. And when you break a streak, Kaizen's gentleness returns. You don't shame yourself. You restart. You mark that new dot, and you move forward. Remember, this is not a test. It's a mirror. The goal isn't to be perfect. It's to be present. Marcus Aurelius said, if someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed. Tracking is how you show yourself what's real. Because without a number, without a mark, without a record, your progress lives in your imagination. But with one tiny dot on a calendar, it becomes real. Let's make it real now. Say this out loud or write it down. 1% today. I will track my habit nightly in under 30 seconds. Keep it simple. Keep it visible. Keep it going. This is how you move from guessing to growing. 9. The moment of truth. There comes a point in every habit journey where things get quiet. No more excitement, no newness, no applause. It's just you and the next repetition. This is what I call the moment of truth. Not a crisis, not a relapse. Just the moment where consistency starts to feel boring, where the habit no longer feels inspiring, but invisible, and this is where most people quit. Not because it's hard, but because it feels flat. But here's the truth. No one tells you. Boredom is a milestone. It means the habit is working its way into your identity. It's no longer a performance. It's becoming part of your rhythm. And if you stop now, you miss the very point where change begins to settle in your bones. The Japanese call this Keizoku wa chikara nari. Continuity is power. It's not flashy. It doesn't trend. But it wins. Let me show you how this plays out. Imagine someone who's been practicing the 1-minute Kaizen method for 30 days. The first week felt amazing. Tiny wins. A sense of pride. The habit tracker filled with dots. The second week, life got noisy. But they kept going. Then came week 3. No changes in weight. No noticeable transformation, just the same. And the thought begins to creep in. Is this even doing anything? That's the test. The test isn't whether you can start, it's whether you can continue without results, whether you can keep voting for your future self, even when the future hasn't shown up yet. Philosopher William James once said, "Sow an act, and you reap a habit. Sow a habit, and you reap a character. Sow a character, and you reap a destiny." But sowing takes time, and sometimes you sow in silence. This is where many people fall for what I call the shiny object trap. They abandon the boring system for a new plan, a new app, a new guru. But nothing works unless you do, gently, rhythmically, patiently. That's what makes this moment sacred. When the habit no longer feels exciting and you keep doing it anyway, that's the moment you become unstoppable, because your self-respect stops depending on dopamine. It starts depending on action. This is where emotional maturity enters the game. Not chasing pleasure, not avoiding discomfort, just doing the right thing because it's the right thing. Even Musashi, the great samurai, wrote in the Dokudo, "Do not pursue pleasure for its own sake, because pleasure fades, but practice remains." So when the silence comes, when the results haven't arrived and no one's watching, what will you do? That is your moment of truth. Here's how you ground yourself in it. Say this out loud or write it in your notes. 1% today. I will repeat my habit, especially when it feels boring. Because boredom isn't failure. It's the threshold of transformation. And when you cross it, you don't go back. 10. The complete system. At this point, you might be wondering, how do I put it all together? You've seen the pieces: 1-minute habits, if-then responses, daily tracking, embracing boredom, responding to failure with curiosity. But a single gear doesn't make a clock. What you need now is the rhythm, the flow, the system that works not just once, but every time life tests you. Let me give you the full Kaizen loop. Simple, practical, and battle-tested. Step 1. Design your 1-minute ritual. This is your daily anchor, not a resolution. A behavior so small it fits inside your lowest energy day. The kind of action that costs nothing but builds trust. Whether it's standing still before a craving, stretching after waking up, or taking one breath before speaking, it must be doable without debate. Step 2. Attach it to a cue. This is your trigger. The habit must link to something already happening. Brushing your teeth, finishing lunch, locking your door. That's what builds rhythm. If you wait for motivation, you'll wait forever. If you rely on cues, you act automatically. Step 3. Create your if-then plan. What's the trigger that usually breaks your pattern? Anticipate it. Write it clearly. If I feel like skipping today, then I will do 30 seconds only. If I get overwhelmed at work, then I will pause and breathe. This step protects you from the storm. Step 4. Track your habit in 30 seconds or less. It doesn't matter how. Paper, app, wall calendar. You need a visible signal, something that says, "I showed up." Not to impress anyone, but to remind your brain, we're doing this now. Step 5. Accept the fall. Return with a fix. Miss a day? Good. Now prove you're serious. Pull the cord like the andon in Toyota. What failed? Was it the time, the environment, the energy? Change one small thing. Your comeback is more important than your slip. Step 6. Keep going when it feels boring. This is the final threshold. If you can act without needing excitement, you've crossed into mastery. Boredom means the habit is becoming identity. Don't seek new. Seek consistent. This, in total, is your Kaizen habit loop. It's not loud, it doesn't go viral, but it works. Now, here's the most important part of all this. You don't need to do it all today. In fact, Kaizen insists you don't. Start with one piece. Anchor it, then add the next. This isn't a race, it's a rhythm. Remember what Miyamoto Musashi taught. Do nothing which is of no use. If it's not helping you grow, it's noise. And your system must be quiet enough to hear your own signal through the clutter. That's what this system does. It doesn't change everything at once. It makes space for the right thing to grow, slowly, gently, surely. So let's make it real now. Say this out loud or write it down. 1% today. I will run the full Kaizen loop, starting with my 1-minute anchor. 1 minute, 1 cue, 1 tiny win, and then repeat. Because when systems work, your identity rewrites itself. 11. Smart relapse protocol. Never miss twice. No system is bulletproof. No habit is immune to chaos. Life happens. Stress hits. Schedules collapse. You fall off track. Not once, but maybe twice, maybe more. Let's begin with the science. In 2013, researchers studying exercise habits found that people who missed a workout once had zero impact on long-term success. But people who missed twice in a row were far more likely to stop altogether. Why? Because the second miss doesn't feel like an accident. It feels like a new pattern. The second miss is the danger. That's where most people turn a slip into a spiral. One bag of chips becomes a weekend binge. One missed meditation becomes a month of noise. The failure isn't the habit, it's the mindset. If I can't be perfect, why try? But Kaizen teaches the opposite. Perfection is not required. Consistency is recovered. The solution? Build your comeback into the system. This is what I call the reboot plan. It's not motivational, it's mechanical. When you miss a habit once, whether it's journaling, walking, sleeping on time, your only job is to show up the very next day for the smallest version possible. Not a grand recovery, not an overcompensation, just 1 minute, 1 repetition, 1 proof to your mind. We don't disappear, we return. Let's look at this through a real lens. During Japan's Kaizen revolution, relapse wasn't just expected, it was studied. When factories made errors, they didn't scold. They redesigned the process to make the mistake harder to repeat. They didn't say, try harder. They said, build smarter. Apply this to your life. If your relapse happens at night, maybe your phone sleeps in another room. If you miss a morning habit, maybe you move it to lunch. If you break your eating plan when stressed, maybe you preload snacks that don't trigger a spiral. The key here isn't willpower, it's re-engineering friction. Make your worst habits slightly harder, make your comeback habits slightly easier. That's it. Even Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, knew this truth. He wrote, "It is not things that disturb us, but our view of things. Missing one day is just a thing. Missing twice because of shame, guilt, or overreaction is a distorted view." And Kaizen clears that distortion by keeping your recovery light, quick, and automatic. Here's how to make it work for you today. Choose the habit you've committed to. Now write this. 1% today. If I miss one day, I will return the next with the easiest version possible. This becomes your promise. Not to be flawless, but to never go missing twice in a row. Because greatness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from how quietly you return after the storm. 12. The legacy. When you think of changing your habits, it's easy to focus on what you'll gain. More energy, more discipline, better health, less regret. And those are real. But there's something deeper at stake. Something most people don't realize until it's too late. Your habits become your legacy. Not the flashy moments, not the big wins, but the invisible things you repeat when no one's watching. The way you show up, the way you respond, the way you move through your day when you're tired, when you're stressed, when the world isn't cheering you on. That is what people remember. That is what you remember. Because over time, every tiny habit you build or ignore becomes a thread, and those threads become a fabric, and that fabric becomes your life. Kaizen was never just about productivity. It was never about hacks or discipline porn. It was always about respect for yourself, for the process, for time itself. The samurai understood this. In Bushido, the code of the warrior, it was said that honor wasn't shown in battle. It was shown in the daily rituals. How you cleaned your blade, how you folded your uniform, how you bowed before training. Because those small rituals were proof of character. We live in a world obsessed with the highlight reel. But what builds your legacy isn't what people see. It's what you practice when they don't. That 1-minute walk, that quiet breath before reacting, that journal note at night. Those are not just tools for change. They are witnesses, proofs, evidence that you honored yourself today. And here's the real reason this matters. One day, your time will end. Your energy will fade. Your name may be forgotten. But what won't be forgotten is what your daily choices built. In your body, in your relationships, in your children, in the moments you left behind. Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara, who we mentioned earlier, the doctor who lived to 105, was once asked what he feared most about aging. He didn't say death. He said stagnation. Life, he said, is only meaningful when you are still growing, even in the smallest ways. That's what Kaizen gives you, a way to keep growing, a way to keep living, on purpose. So when people ask you, how did you change? You won't say, I found the perfect program. You'll say, I did one small thing every day until it became me, and that became my peace. So today, here's your final anchor. Say this out loud or write it in your notes. 1% today. I will live a life of quiet progress, starting with this 1 minute. No one needs to see it. No one needs to praise it. But in the end, that 1 minute becomes your name. If this message meant something to you today, carry it with you.